Good evening, council staff, ladies and gentlemen, and those who may be watching online, and welcome to our council meeting. The City of Swan disclaims any liability for any loss arising from any person or body relying on any statement, discussion, recommendation or decision made during this meeting. Where an application for an approval, a licence or the like is considered or determined during this meeting, the City warns that neither the applicant nor any other person or body should rely upon that discussion or determination until written notice of either an approval and the conditions which relate to it or the refusal of the application has been issued by the City. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed. The recording will also be archived and made available on the City's website after the meeting. If you choose to participate in the meeting during public question time or public statement time, it is assumed that your consent is given for the audio to be recorded. Please keep your comments respectful to the council and other members of the community. Visual images of the public will not be captured. Conditions of entry: no electronic, visual or audio recording or transmitting device or instrument is permitted to be used. A person who breaches this provision of the City of Swan Meeting Procedures Local Law 2019 will be required to immediately leave the premises. Attendance and apologies. Mr. CEO, at this point in time I have nil. Declarations of financial and proximity interest and interests affecting impartiality. Mr. CEO, do we need to run through those?
Mr. Mayor, no, you've got the list there.
Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, plus I've also received one from Councillor Congleton in relation to item 12.1, that's the minutes of the meeting. He's declared a proximity interest in relation to the amendment to the minutes in that he owns property adjacent to the southern portion of Paradise Keys, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Any further declarations from either staff or councillors? Be none. Public question time. Questions are marked with an asterisk have been amended either for the purpose of summarising, e.g. removing preamble statements or editing. 5.1 is answers to questions that were taken on notice. There are questions and answers from the 3rd of June from Mr. Mark Richards, Bob Ellsbury, Mr. Dave Glossop, Ms. Sass Jacobs and Karen Mowat, and those are in the agenda. Questions relating to reports contained in the agenda at this point in time, there are nil. 5.2.2, questions without due notice. Other questions to the public gallery in relation to items on the agenda? Yes. If you'd just like to come forward to the microphone, state your name, please, and ask your question.
My name is Pam Reardon. Thank you for the opportunity to offer the question. The Guildford Conservation Policy says houses should generally appear as single-storey, as viewed from the street, and that double-storey elements may be approved where sympathetic and in scale with development in the context. There is no mention of 3 storeys. This house is a 3-level overdevelopment. It is 3 levels in order to accommodate 417 square metres of floor area on a limited building site. This makes it a very high and bulky building.
Do you have a question, Ms. Reardon?
My question is, how many storeys do you consider this building to be?
Mr. CEO, who's right to answer that one? Mr. Russell or Mr. Tan? Mr. Russell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, look, it's fairly clear it's 2. I would say if you look at the Undercroft recession of the garage, I would say it's probably you could characterise it or claim it to be 2.5 storeys if you were of a mind, yep.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Reardon. Any further questions from the gallery on items on the agenda? Yes, sir. I think you were first. Just state your name and ask your question, please.
My name's Richard Sawada. My question is, there was no mention of the metre plus over height in the report.
And your question?
No mention in the report of being 1 metre over height.
Okay. Mr. Russell,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I couldn't agree with that. If we look to page 96, or the 6th page of the report, it talks about wall heights and overall height, and those are the reference points to the R codes. But as I would hope the report makes clear, and in the supplementary information that was circulated to councillors this afternoon, the salient point here is that height is a component of size and scale under the Guildford Precinct Conservation Precinct Design Guidelines. And those are the relevant instruments that we have regard to, not the R codes in this respect. So whilst the comment on page 96 or the 6th page of the report sets out wall heights, okay, those are certain degrees in excess of what would be the standard in the R codes, where you don't have an otherwise adopted policy such as we have in Guildford. So that's all stated there, but the focus of the report is right as it should be in terms of considering the height as a part of size and scale with reference to the context of other development in the street.
Thank you, Mr Russell.
Is it or is it not 1 metre above height?
Mr Russell.
Through you, Mr Mayor, if you're going to ask a question on that, you must frame it with reference to what. If the gentleman's question is it or is it not more than 1 metre above height, then I will take that as a reference as to is it or is it not 1 metre above height with respect to Table 3 height aspects B of the R codes. It is as follows. The wall height under pitched roof is, as it's indicated on page 6 of the report, 7.3 metres. That would be 1.3 metres above the standard for Table B in the R codes. For the wall height concealed roof, okay, it is 0.65 of a metre greater than that standard. And the overall height, it's 1.2 metres greater than that standard. But I can't stress enough, Mr Mayor, do not be confused with the misapplication of the R code standards here. But the gentleman's question, that is the frame of reference to the standard height for Area B, but that is not what is being applied here.
Thank you, Mr Russell.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Zoda. Lady in the front row, if you just come to the microphone, state your name and ask your question.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. My name is Dr Christine Hogan with regards to the design of house at 170 Swan Street. My question is as follows. To what extent does community opinion get taken into account by the City of Swan, given that there have been a total of 49 written objections, 11 deputations last week, and 16 residents of Swan Street are still opposed to the modernistic design and overdevelopment of the site?
Mr Russell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, I hope the report makes plain the degree of taking into account the community's opinion. The community's opinion, as expressed in the original proposal as advertised, was accepted by city staff in that it didn't fit in. It was also accepted by the Heritage Council. So we agreed with the community's original submissions on the original proposal that it wasn't in line. Subsequently then, we feel that the proponent has addressed the nature of the variations with respect to meeting the performance criteria of the Guildford Conservation Precinct Design Guidelines, and that is to be consistent or not have an adverse impact on development in its context. And I would hope, Mr Mayor, that the report has conveyed that and explained it. So we do take into account the community's views, but it's important to note, as is well understood in the state of Western Australia and planning law, simply because people, one person or 100 or 1,000, objects to something does not follow then that the automatic outcome must be a refusal. So the report has taken into account the community's views, but it's important to note it does not, and it cannot be the case that it must accept what the community is saying on any point where there's a matter of contention or compliance.
Thank you, Mr Russell.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Hagan. Any further questions? Thank you. 5.3.1 of questions of which notice was given, and in the green folder there are questions and answers to Ms Naomi Jenkins, Karen Mowat, Bob Ellsbury, Sash Jacobs and Bob Baku, Ms Barbara Dundas. Public statement time. We have one public statement registered from Mr Zawada. Mr Zawada, if you're ready for your public statement. Yep, and you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Before I start, I would please ask the Mayor if I can present important information unknown to councillors which has not been canvassed before. Try as I might, I can only condense it to under 4 minutes and 40 seconds.
Now, we were pretty clear that it was 2 minutes, Mr. Ryder, and that's been the criteria. Deputations were last week, which would have given you
Mayor,
the opportunity to speak.
If I could, given the lack of speakers tonight, is it possible that we could extend another 2 minutes to Mr. Zanino's?
Very
No,
much,
Mr. Zawada, sorry.
We've got a bit to get through, still 2 hours to get through a fair bit.
Well, I'd like to move that we give him an extra 2 minutes. Thank
We'll
you.
have a mover and obviously a second. Councillors in favour of the extension? Five. I'm sorry, Mr. Zawada, but if you can briefly just give us a... Okay, so that would give us one. And what I have over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Still lost. I'm sorry, Mr. Zawada. If you could just condense it to 2 minutes, to be appreciated. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Richard Zawada. I live at 182 Swan Street, Guildford, and have lived in Guildford for 55 years. The community is very sceptical of the Heritage Council's commitment to retain Guildford's cherished character and uniqueness. Recently, at 32 Market Street, Guildford, an award-winning heritage architect, not Phil Griffiths, designed and had approved a removal of the original bullnose veranda and replaced with a flat skillion roof. Likewise, the original turned veranda posts with square posts and others. This most original Queen Anne-style house in Guildford is now lost and altered forever to satisfy the current temporary owner, heritage vandalism. Your staff state the 10 metre radius rule cannot apply because the Undercroft could not proceed. It's simple. Don't approve or allow the non-compliant garage to be built in the current location and size, or lose 2 mature trees on Mere Street Reserve to satisfy the current temporary owner. We must move forward with 21st century development, was the state by Phil Griffiths, heritage architect. No, it's environmental vandalism. This grand design, non-compliant, except for the red brick and steel balustrade, will leave a stain on the streetscape forever, long after the current owner has left town. You can put as much lipstick on a pig as you like, but it will still be a pig.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder. Appreciate your time. Okay, now that takes us now to petitions. Councillors, at this point in time I have no petitions unless anyone has a petition to present. Thank you. Deputations were heard last week. Announcements by the presiding member, and councillors, I do have one announcement. Tonight is a special occasion for one of our executive managers. After more than 48 years in local government, Mr Stephen Tan has finally putting down the red pen and the slide rule to spend more time with his family. Stephen has spent the last 17 years with the City of Swan, including 8 years as Executive Manager of Planning and Development. I'm proud to say that his dogged determination to see the best community outcome has certainly put many developers back into line. His no-nonsense approach to planning has seen the City of Swan become home to over 1,500 new households each year and regularly taking out the gong for some of Australia's fastest-growing suburbs. Mr Tan's reputation precedes him. Not only do young graduates flock to his feet at conferences, and I've seen it as almost like God, I'm sure there are some developers who generally quake in their boots when they meet with him, knowing that Mr Tan will be fighting to ensure that vital community infrastructure, roads, parks are paid for by developers before approval is provided. The battle that we still have today. After 48 years in local government, Mr Tan has seen many changes, namely the invention of computers, satellite imagery, GPS and aerial mapping. Some might say he's still more comfortable with the old pen and paper, especially if you've ever looked in his office. But even in these last months, Stephen has been a strong advocate for new technology and integrating it into the workplace to improve efficiency and accuracy. Stephen has overseen many developments in the City of Swan and some more complex amendments, including the Henley Brook and Bullsbrook master plans, new junction development and many infill projects. In his time as Executive Manager, Stephen has signed off on almost $2 billion in non-residential building approvals and $4 billion in residential building approvals. His service is valued and appreciated. nominated. Stephen, thank you for your service. On behalf of the Council and the City of Swan, we wish you all the best in your retirement, and we hope you've got time to improve your golf game.
Thank you.
We now go to members' questions, and 10.1 is questions for which due notice were taken on notice, and there are nil. There are 2 questions from Councillor Johnson, and Councillor Johnson, those answers are in the green folder.
Got a follow-up, Mr Mayor.
Your following question?
Yeah, 10.3. So my question is about the $22,000 Christmas tree in Ellenbrook. Are we planning to spend another $22,000 this year?
Mr Coaten?
As on the last sentence, it will be undertaken again in 2020.
I guess that was my question. Will it be another $22,000? Which seems a lot for a Christmas tree.
Yeah. I haven't looked into it to that level of detail. It would certainly be in that order of magnitude because the amount on the budget is the same, $60,000 for the Midland Town Hall and in Ellenbrook, so it would be in that order of magnitude, but it hasn't been broken down to that level of detail.
I just wondered, Mr Mayor, if next year we could get one from Bunnings. It might be a bit cheaper.
I wouldn't think you'd get one about 16 metres high. That might be a bit difficult to put in the back of your car. Okay.
Mr Mayor, I've got a question from Councillor Scanlon, if I may, at some point in section 10.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. Okay. Also, there is a question from Councillor Kiley. Councillor Kiley, you've got the answer there in the green folder.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Any other questions from councillors? Councillor Johnson, you're first with Councillor Scanlon's question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, Councillor Scanlon's question, who is dialling in by electronic means, but this is easier. Over the weekend, many areas in the city were flooded due to heavy rains. Of particular note was flooding in South Guildford, as reported on Channel 7 News. Residents were left stranded, unable to drive their cars on the flooded roads. May I ask, what is the city doing to ensure this doesn't happen every time we have a deluge of rain, which is forecast to increase with climate change?
Mr Coaten?
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. Water from that subdivision flows downstream through the Rosehill subdivision. There was some open drain through there that had a lot of typha growing in them. Over the summer it grew rapidly. City staff had asked the contractor to remove, the developer to remove that growth, and a lot of it had occurred, but there was one section that was still remaining over the weekend. That has now been cleared. So the longer-term options that the city is looking at is some form of lining in that open drain to prevent the regrowth, such as perhaps a concrete base, and also looking at, in the actual subdivision, the area that flooded the worst was in Gentle Circle. And there's an area we're looking at modifying one of the areas of the verge to lower it to provide a swale so that when the water gets to a certain level it won't go any higher than that and will escape through overland flow.
And are we planning to notify the residents of this plan?
We haven't finalised a plan as yet. The residents, if we do the verge modifications, we would normally notify the residents adjacent to that, but the other residents, the work would be downstream, so they wouldn't actually see it.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Richardson, you're next.
Mr Mayor, if I can please have an update on the Ellenbrook Leisure Centre for the community, please, where we're at with that, and the advertisement that was in the paper to clear that block, please.
Okay. Mr Coaten?
Yeah, I think the advertisement that's being referred to is the calling of the tenders for the Forward Works package. So that is essentially calling the tender to start the earthworks for levelling of the site and some excavation so that it's close to finished level, so that when the go-ahead is given to, when we get finalise the funding, the earthworks will be already in place. So tenders for that will close shortly, and then that will come to the TRC, and hopefully we'll be seeing some work on site in the not too distant future.
Councillor Kiley?
Mayor, thank you. Given that Ellenbrook has $22,000 allocated towards it for a Christmas tree, I wondered how I go about getting a Christmas tree for Kiara. Can we allocate another $22,000 for a suburb that I represent as well? How do I go about doing that?
Put a question, put on the budget. Councillor Kelano, you're next. Councillor, we do need to move on. We're nearly going to waste half an hour of question. Another question?
Yes, on May 11th, at a special meeting of council, this council unanimously resolved to allocate $25,000 to 88.5 FM community radio based in Ellenbrook. I would like to know why that money has not been forthcoming to the 88.5 FM community radio.
Mr. CEO.
Mr Mayor, it was also tied in, one of the recommendations was that an MOU be prepared. The MOU has been prepared, it's been passed on to the group. As of this morning, Mr Mayor, I have not had any contact, nor my staff, with 88.5. And also, Mr Mayor, it's probably worth noting that we have now received a rescission motion signed by 5 councillors on that decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, that's not actually correct, what the CEO said. I've got an email from the 19th of June, Friday the 19th of June, saying that the radio station are surprised that the money wasn't going to be paid as a lump sum. And on the night, the CEO is quoted as knowing full well that that was going to be paid as a lump sum. I want to know what you, Mayor, are going to do about ensuring that this station and my motion that was passed unanimously gets implemented.
Mr Mayor, as I just said, I've now received a rescission motion signed by 5 councillors, which we're getting legal advice on, as we've partly implemented that, Mr Mayor, so we will not be paying the $25,000 until such matter is resolved by council.
I would suggest that
Mayor, the question was actually to you. What are you doing about ensuring that 88.5 get their money and you have this motion implemented as it was moved and passed unanimously?
Well, as soon as the radio station come back with a yes or no, Councillor, I'm happy to take it to the next phase, but like the CEO mentioned, there is a rescission motion in.
I've also got an email from the CEO saying that this motion has already been implemented, so yes. I don't know how on earth this council could consider a rescission motion given the CEO's already claimed that it's been implemented already.
As the CEO just said, he has a rescission motion. He's getting legal advice on that implementation to say whether the rescission motion is valid or not. It's shut down.
I'd still like to know what you are doing about supporting your community and 88.5 FM in ensuring this motion gets approved.
Well, Councillor, you might be hard of hearing. I said as soon as the radio station comes back and says they reject the MOU that was presented to them, I'm happy to take it to the next level.
What were you doing being involved in the negotiations when it's clearly a role of a staff member and not the Mayor?
Well, for clarity, I'll make the point to you. I presented the MOU and I read it and then presented it to them and offered them to signing. That's as far as I took. Councillors, if you want to spend all my questions...
One last question, Mayor. You support the Ellenbrook Community Collective over the years in getting funding. Why aren't you supporting 88.5 FM in getting this funding?
Well, I'd like you to detail how I did that, but I'll support any group, and I'm also a member now too of 88.5, and I've told them that I'll offer them my support as soon as they give us clarity on what they want to do with that MOU. Councillor, someone else had a hand up. Councillor Catalano had a hand up first.
Yeah, thanks. Oh, I just wanted to follow on actually with the Christmas lights for at least one of the Elthone ward suburbs, and I basically just want to know how we're going to get that because last year I made some inquiries and we ended up with a couple of strings of lights, but I'd like to see something a little bit more spectacular for at least one suburb there. So how will we do that?
Well, I think as the Mayor said, if you want significant lights like that, they need to be added to the budget as they've been for Midland and Ellenbrook. It's really a decision for council.
Oh, okay, so you mean it's got to be brought back to council? Through a motion in council?
It's got to go to budget.
Well, it's appropriate to do that through the budget process.
Okay, Councillor Richards.
Can we find out who the 5 councillors were that put in the rescission against 88.5? Thanks.
In due course,
yes,
that'll be seen later.
If it's already in, Mayor, I'd really like to hear that, given that you're not implementing the motion as it was moved unanimously on the 11th of May.
Well, the CEO hasn't decided whether the rescission's valid yet, so it might get chucked in the bin if the legal advice says that it's past that.
Why are you even considering it? Your job is to liaise with the CEO and ensure that he implements motions as they've been passed. This was unanimously passed. I cannot see how you or the CEO are going to sit back and let this
point of order, Mr. Mayor.
ride.
There we go. Point of order. Councillor Congleton.
Mr. Mayor, it's supposed to be questions, and it's gone a long way beyond questions to accusations. I understand, and I'm not directing it. I'm directing it to the chair. Thank you, Councillor. To accusations and debate. Can we please bring it back to questions?
I agree with you 100%. Councillor Richardson, you had a question? No questions.
I've got a final question, Mayor. Councillor Congleton, on the night... Councillor Congleton on the... Sorry, John, I'll just finish in 1 second. Councillor Congleton on the night said in this particular case we are paying everything up front. So even Councillor Congleton is aware that we were going to be paying this money, this $25,000 to 88.5. I want to know what you are going to do to ensure the CEO acts in his role as the CEO and implements the motions. He's got a statutory obligation to do so. You, as Mayor, need to ensure that that happens. What are you going to do?
I've already told you, Councillor. So, Councillor McNamara, you've got a question?
The first question I have is, are we on 10.1, 2 or 3?
We are currently... we are at other questions from councillors.
Other questions from councillors?
Yeah, so we
without notice?
It's... after the questions have been provided, there's a section that says any other questions from councillors.
I'm looking at 10.3 here. It says questions which due notice have not been given. That's what I want to ask the question on.
Yeah, so there's a part there that says any other questions, councillors. That's where we're at. So if you wish to ask a question, you can go for it right now.
Thank you. The question is to Mr. Tan, and I'm sorry for putting you through this, Mr. Tan, whatever you are. Sorry.
Again, microphone, John, please. Thank you. Just the... Yeah, that's it.
Right. It's with regard to the resolution to actually adopt the minutes. So I'll wait for Councillor Congleton to leave before I ask the question.
Do you perhaps wish to wait till we get to that point, because that's coming up next? You could ask the
No,
question.
this is question time, so just in case I'm ruled out of order, I'm asking the questions during question time.
No worries, ask it now.
Right. So, first question I'll ask through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Tan is, when he says 5.6 in his recommendations, if these recommendations came from him, were not consistent with the intent of the actual item. What does he mean, and why are they not consistent? That's the first question.
Mr. Tan, did you hear the question?
I'm sorry, Councillor McNamara, I couldn't hear what you asked the question.
Right. On the first paragraph the first paragraph that's after this, which says Part 5 and 6 of the Council resolution contains some wording that result in a part of the recorded decision being not consistent with the intent of Council decision. What is not consistent?
Mr. Tan.
Mr. Mayor, if you look at the Council resolution on the 3rd of June, which I've sent a copy to you, I presume you received it. The recommendation 5, resolution 5 says, once subdivision has occurred, apply for the consent under section 18 of the Aboriginal Heritage Act for the southern portion of lot 501 Paradise Ski Ballajura prior to going to the market via an expression of interest process. Resolution 6 says, upon finalization of subdivision of lot 501 Paradise Ski Ballajura into 2 lots, as outlined above at resolution 3 above, the CEO submit a report to Council to initiate an amendment to local planning scheme to rezone the southern portion of the lot from special use zone to local reserve. The difference is, resolution 5 says you go out following you go out for an expression of interest. Resolution 6 says you initiate a scheme amendment. So the question is, the intent has always been that you do not go up to expression of interest under Resolution 5 until the scheme amendment is initiated and resolved. That's the difference. And it's quite clear in the explanation in the confirmation of the minutes under Section 12.
Thank you, Mr. Tan.
My next question is, who actually formed this particular recommendation? Did it come from the councillor or did it come from the staff?
Mr. Tan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, staff draw attention to the council on the intent of those two resolutions.
Thank you, Mr. Tan.
And Mr. Tan, through you, Mr. Mayor, the actual subdivision going out for rezoning and change to the scheme 17, to rezone the portion. Does that mean that it comes back to council as the actual thing says, or does this recommendation prefer not to come back to council?
Stan?
The scheme amendment process will come to council. If you look at the minutes which I sent it to you, Resolution 6 was an amendment by Councillor Perry, and it was carried unanimously to rezone the land on the southern portion from special use to recreation.
Further question, Councillor McNamara?
Yes, and the final question will be, your last statement is, as a result, the city does not intend to implement that part of the recorded resolution. Now, which part are you talking about? You may have taught me already in the last couple of questions answered, but I didn't actually understand it. So can you please tell me what intended implementation will the city not follow?
Mr.
In terms of Resolution 5, we would not go out to expression of interest until Resolution 6 for a scheme amendment is finalised.
Thank you.
So do you not agree with me, Mr. Tan, that this recommendation that's on for tonight for the change of the minutes is actually a little bit ambiguous from the point of view of of understanding to the regular, maybe even to the residents that are impacted by this?
Mr. Mayor, this matter was put up at the last meeting, at the council meeting on the 3rd, and there was no dissension from the council. I presume all those present understood exactly what those changes were.
Thank you. Councillor.
And finally, Mr. Mayor,
thank you.
sorry,
We need to move on. Thank you.
It's just a statement rather than a question, and I know just like this is question time. The statement was, I didn't attend the last meeting due to my leave of absence situation, and that is really ironic that it did come up when I was missing. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Thank you, councillors. Leave of absence? Oh, yeah, recall, councillor, yeah. Thank you. He's probably fallen asleep. Thank you, Councillor Parry. Councillors over leave of absence from Councillor Parry from the 8th of July 2020 to the 18th of July 2020, inclusive. Are there any other leave of absence?
Councillor Podovnik has requested leave of absence, Mr. Mayor, from 22nd of July until the 30th of July.
Okay. Any further? Thank you. Can I have a mover that they be accepted? Moved Councillor Zanino, seconded Councillor Richardson. No one against, declare that carried. It takes us to confirmation of the minutes, and then there's a recommendation that Council resolve to confirm the minutes of the ordinary Council meeting of the 3rd of June 2020, subject to the additional following note of clarification item C 3.3, the proposed aged care development at Paradise Keys, Balladura, sale and development agreement with Southern Cross Care. Councillors, can I have a mover? A further question?
On this particular issue. The issue is that I wasn't here, so I can't vote on it. I can't vote on the minutes.
Yes, you can.
But I do disagree with the implementation of this. So how do I plan this out?
Well, after the meeting, you can move a rescission motion.
decision motion, I'm going to be wasting council's time. It's not going to succeed. So basically, what I'm saying is that I wasn't here for the minutes, so I can't vote on it. Number one, so I have to leave the chairman. Second of all, but I do disagree with this recommendation. So how do I?
You can vote against the adoption of the minutes.
You can vote against the adoption of the minutes. Yep. Okay. Okay. Can I have a move? I had a mover and a seconder. So moved Councillor Parry, seconded Councillor Congleton. Councillor McCulloch. Where is Councillor Congleton anyway?
When that's right, because he's got financial interest.
Oh, he has too, yeah. Okay. Is there anyone against? Do we really wish to debate it? No. Okay. Okay. Those in favour? 13 to 1. Okay. Carried. Yep. Go and find him. 35 minutes. Thank you, councillors. That takes us to part 13, which is business left over from previous minutes. And item 13.8 is the adoption of the local planning policy, PLP 1.31 design review, and a motion from Councillor Catalano.
Yes, thank you. So I want to amend the recommendation. So I'll start at the top. Council resolved to amend the draft local planning policy design review and terms of reference to include at 3.1a, so that's to add or include, and proposals of 8 or more group dwellings. Adopt the draft local planning policy.
You just read paragraph 3. That's
yes,
the amendment.
thank you. That's good. Authorise the council to terminate the appointment of a member of the design review panel in a confidential meeting. And I think they should just read panel. I might have...
you just need a reason for the changes, that's all.
Yeah. Basically, because...
Reasons down the bottom, paragraph 7.
Oh, thank you. I didn't put them on my... So most councils in the metropolitan area have included group dwellings as the state government has proposed in the model text, and council should retain oversight of members who are terminated from the panel.
Thank you, Councillor Catalano. Do you have a seconder? Second is Councillor Johnson. Is anyone against? Question, Councillor McCulloch.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Catalano. I'm just querying the amendment in section 1 and proposals of 8 or more group dwellings as to the definition of that.
Okay, question?
The definition of that is included in the model text, the same as the model text.
Sorry, further question, Mr Mayor. I had wondered if it wasn't more appropriate, the 8 or more grouped dwellings compared to grouped dwellings of 8 or more.
Oh, yeah, okay, I understand. You're saying it should be worded the other way around. It says proposals of
or just clarity
group dwellings
around
of
that.
8 or more units.
8 or more units.
8 or more units is
in
a
group dwelling.
Single group dwelling. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah. You follow that, Councillor Catalano?
I see what you mean. Instead of 8 or more group dwellings
the other way
in the
around.
one. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, that,
in the group
and I'm happy to change that if as it does read. That's exactly right. In each particular
8 or more units in the group,
yeah,
as per
each
the board, as per the board.
Group dwellings of 8 or more.
Units in a group in a group
of
in a group
8 or
dwelling.
more units in
a group dwelling.
Or a group dwelling of group dwellings of 8
and
or more
proposals
units.
As per the board, as per the thing,
and a proposal of 8. That's not quite correct either. Sorry.
Well, can I just correct that, Councillor? Let's see if you think what I'm thinking. That
yes.
It says proposals of group dwellings of 8 or more units.
That's correct.
Okay,
yes.
so you got that? Just switch that around a bit.
That's
Danica?
correct.
Yeah.
That's more correct. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So, okay, so what have we got? And proposals for grouped dwellings.
And just need to put units after the word 8. Danica, if you could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for that. That's great.
Is that okay for the seconder?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'll move in a second. Is anyone against?
Question.
Councillor Lucas, you have a question?
Yes, Councillor Catalano referred to the state guidelines. I've been asked by the planning staff, what do the state guidelines say in relation to the number of units?
Mr Tan?
Please, Mr. Mayor, the guideline talks about 10 group dwellings, 10 units or more. And that's been adopted by most council with 10 or more.
That's it. So there was no one against? Councillor Guillard, do you wish to debate it?
Unless Councillor Catalano wishes to prove in line with the state guidelines, most other councils with 10 units or more.
If that's the only obstacle, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, so just amend that to 10. Is that okay with the seconder?
Yes.
Okay. Could the delegate change to 8 to 10? Okay. So we're going to move a seconder. There's no one against? Declare that carried. It takes us now
Thank
to
you.
Part B. In Part B, I have item 1.2, 3.2 and 5.4 to be withdrawn. And I think, Councillor Jones, you indicated you wanted to move an amendment on that's in C, sorry. Yep, that is in C. Yep. So, given that there's no other items withdrawn, councillors, can I have a mover that those items not with 1.2, 3.2, 5.4. Okay, so can I have a mover that the items not withdrawn be adopted? Moved Councillor Lucas, seconded Councillor Parry. Is there any against? Declare it carried. And the first item is item 3.2, the single house at lot 1 number.
Yeah, got it. Sorry, yes, 1.2. I thought you said was withdrawn. No?
No, sorry, policy review, Lisa, excuse me, no. Yeah, I'm sorry, Councillor, that is not 1.2. I had it circled here for something else. Okay, so it's only 3.2 and 5.4. Okay, so I've got to move it a seconder that the remainder be adopted. Is anyone against? Declare those carried. That takes us now to item 3.2, which is the proposed single dwelling at 170 Swan Street. And Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, my alternate motion is the Council resolve to refuse the application for the single house at Lot 1, number 170 Swan Street West, Guildford, on the grounds that the proposed development does not comply with the requirements of local planning policy PRLC 106 Guildford Conservation Precinct pertaining to size and scale and form and siting. The proposed development is incompatible with surrounding development by virtue of its size, scale, form and siting. Number 3, that proposed development will have an adverse visual impact on the character of street and the Guildford heritage area. And I'm assuming, Mr Mayor, that the reasons are all of the above.
They are. Okay, no seconder. Councillor Prodovnik. Is there anyone against? The original, I assume we wish to debate it. So, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor.
And I'll remind you, you have 5 minutes.
Yep, sure, thank you. Mr Mayor, 170 Swan Street is not just any old development application. It's different because it's in Guildford. In July 2019, the whole Guildford town site, and just the Guildford town site, was added to the State Register of Heritage Places. Guildford has nearly 300 buildings on the local government heritage register. That's about half the heritage buildings in the whole of the city of Swan. 26 of these heritage buildings are on Swan Street, including the Rose and Crown, the oldest pub in Western Australia. So that's the context. So only Guildford has this unusual concentration of heritage buildings. The site, councillors, is currently empty. It's situated on the rural fringe of Guildford with uninterrupted views of the Swan River. It's an excellent location. The building next door is not a heritage building. I believe it's from the 1990s. Now, councillors, the report does not contain a table showing compliance with the residential design codes. It is a 2-storey building with an undercroft garage, but that is not unreasonable, as the Rose and Crown itself is 2 storeys. Table 3 of the residential design codes gives maximum heights for residential dwellings in zone R40 or less. This zone is R20. So on pages 128 and 129 of the report, you can see the proposal exceeds the maximum height for the top of the external wall and exceeds the maximum height for the top of the pitched roof. So if you take a look at those pages, councillors, you'll see a nice colourful diagram. So from an R code perspective, the building is taller than it should be. So if you're just looking at it from that perspective, it's bigger than it should be. Now, councillors, turning now to the heritage aspect of this application, for council to decide if this is a suitable building for Guildford, council should refer to the Guildford Conservation Policy to see if the building can be accommodated in Guildford without adversely affecting the cultural significance associated with the post-colonial settlement of WA and without affecting the cultural significance of the town to the Aboriginal community. One of the key points in the Guildford Conservation Policy is that new buildings should not try to look like heritage buildings. Now, councillors, no one could mistake this proposal for a heritage building. The proposal does not look like a heritage building at all, and that is a good thing. But what does it look like? I think this is the deciding factor, councillors. Does it look like a contemporary, early 21st century building? Is it part of an established design pattern of our era so that in 100 years' time, our descendants will see it as another heritage building in a heritage precinct? So, councillors, please turn to page 122 and 123 of the agenda. There have been 55 objections to the application, and during deputations, one point that came up twice in two separate deputations was the dark shipping container-like structure on the western side. So it's particularly obvious on page 122. Councillors, this is not an enclosed balcony. In fact, if you look at the plans, it does not even mark a change of internal use or room. In fact, one room crosses uninterrupted between the container section and the brick section of the building. Councillors, the external architecture, which is unusual, does not reflect the internal function. The container feature appears to be purely decorative, but for what decorative purpose? And for what decorative purpose in Guildford when it clearly does not suit the town, nor is it part of an established early 21st century design pattern? Is the container structure part of a design pattern that is in use elsewhere in the Perth metropolitan area? Has anybody seen anything like this anywhere else? Will it be obvious to future generations that this is a contemporary style of the early 21st century and hence fit
1 minute, Councillor.
With heritage Guildford in the future? Councillors, is this a future heritage building? In my view, councillors, it is none of these things. It does not fit in with Guildford, and I think it potentially could adversely affect the cultural significance of the whole town and its future heritage status. And that is quoting directly from the objectives of the Guildford Conservation Policy, which I have here. Councillors, for ARCO compliance and heritage cultural significant reasons, I think we should reject this design, this particular design, for this site in Guildford. So, councillors, please vote against this because people in Guildford don't want it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bodovnik as seconder. No, second, go next. You two have 5 minutes.
Okay, can everyone hear me clearly? Can you all hear me? Thank you. All right, I ask Council to support option 2 and refuse this application, and I draw Council's attention to point 3, which says the proposed development will have an adverse visual impact on the street character and the Guildford heritage area. Put simply, it doesn't fit in. Yes, there are buildings on Swan Street West that are not heritage, but that's not the point. The point is those modern buildings are sympathetic in their design to the traditional character of the street and appropriate for Guildford. This proposal is not. And that's why 89% of submissions received were objections. Out of 55 public submissions, 49 objected and residents still object. What Guildford residents also object to is the fact many of them have had to jump through hoops to comply with the rules for Guildford, so understandably they have a problem with this development flouting the same rules. This proposal needed to be measured against the local planning policy, C106 Guildford Conservation Precinct, and the Guildford Conservation Precinct Design Guidelines. A letter dated the 18th of February was sent to residents by city staff advising them about the proposal and inviting public comment. That same letter then went on to clearly outline just how many ways this design fell short of complying. In that letter, residents were told the overall height of the house to the pitch of the roof was 10.12 metres, over a metre higher than the 9 metre height limit in the R codes. Residents were also told the wall heights were higher than the R code limits by 1.3 metres, and in the case of the feature walls, it was higher than the limit by 2.1 metre. And if this design's failure to comply wasn't clear enough, residents were also told the proposed design does not conform to guidelines relating to shape, roof pitch, eave overhang, location placement, and design of openings. Unsurprisingly, 89% objected to this development. And unsurprisingly, residents have been left wondering why this proposal was even advertised for comment, especially when city staff knew this development does not fully comply on so many levels. The applicant has revised the design to make changes to the materials and colour. These changes make it partially compliant, but it still doesn't fully correct the list of non-compliant examples so clearly outlined in the city's letter to residents. The WA Heritage Council said the proposed revision demonstrates the design has taken cues from the street in its materials and colour palette. But it needs to do a lot more than that to comply in size, scale and form. We can send this design back to the drawing board. Please support this motion to refuse it. Let's get this right.
Thank you, Councillor. Speakers against the motion? Any speakers against the motion? Councillor McCulloch. You two have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, we've had applicants' deputations, we've had associated information, we've had residents' deputations to hear their concerns and information. We've had questions and public statements this evening in addition to last week's agenda forum. We've addressed things to do with the floodplain level, the look of the building, bulk, size, setback and height have all been addressed in detail. Setback and development ratios have been addressed. At the request of a councillor, we've had our Manager of Planning provide further responses to the various contentions set out in the attached submission by the Guildford Association and architect Mr Patrick Irwin. Even within that submission, I can honestly say that it was disappointing and flawed. Having visited the site with the applicants, and Mr Mayor, I can honestly say I have visited the site and taken the time to listen to both sides, and I do know that the ward councillors supporting their ward for this have not visited the site with these applicants when I asked. So that is a concern. Although one councillor was meeting with neighbours next to this site when we arrived, but seemed in quite a hurry to leave once our presence was known. A few things that I would like to note about the opportunities and the enhancements that contemporary architecture presents in a heritage context. We know that adapting heritage buildings for modern use involves retaining some of the strengths of historic architecture. This building is of its time. It's not replicating, and we've seen many buildings through Guildford and other places who are attempting to do that, and it doesn't, in the long run, prove fruitful. And we want to also consider that successful designers recognise that working with the historic context is not a constraint but an opportunity. We see a building here that's of its time, that reflects the face brick in the street and that has some modernistic, unique features. We went through and had a look in regards to the applicant's answers to some of the questions addressed by residents. And yes, when we have significant amounts of objections, we always know that within our reports they are addressed according to planning and an orderly planning process and what is relevant in regards to that planning. Community consultation is important, but then looking at that as well is important because everyone has their own opinion, and if we held fast to everyone's opinion, we would never get anywhere at any stage. So, councillors, it is necessary to understand and accept that the Guildford Conservation Precinct policy design guidelines supersede the R codes, and I will quote in these moments Mr Russell's information from last week, and the instrument of priority being the Guildford Conservation Precinct Planning Design Guidelines. And that priority has been there since those guidelines' inception. So we can talk about where it doesn't fit and how it doesn't fit, but this is the instrument of priority. If you don't meet the acceptable development provisions, it doesn't mean that you don't comply with the R codes. We know that the applications are assessed against performance principles. People have talked about the western structure, the sea container-like appearance of one part. Again, Mr Mayor, that is their opinion. The application has the tick of approval from the predominant expert agency that adjudicates on heritage in Guildford.
Point of order, Mayor, that has been shown time and again to be incorrect. They are not the predominant authority on heritage in Guildford. We are as a council. It is not the Heritage Council.
I think meant to be their referral body. Okay, carry on, councillor.
Sorry, Mr Mayor. The final word must always be what the agency has said. The agency has the same views as has been presented in the report. Councillors, 1 minute it suits us that we want the Heritage Council to be the final authority, and then the next minute, when it doesn't suit us, we want to be the final authority ourselves. Let's make our minds up. What's it going to be in the name of consistency, transparency and fairness to all our residents and ratepayers? These applicants are our ratepayers. This is their forever home. We're talking about the interior of their house, which is none of our business. From what I've seen and observed, the applicants are going to have a hard time, in some ways, and this is my belief, re-establishing relationship with residents in the street with the damage that has been done with a clique of people. This is not about a clique of people who want just what they want. And I believe, Mr Mayor, and this is entirely my opinion, that what we see here is what appears to be another example of how someone wanting to come into Guildford can be challenged or victimised just because they don't fit
Thank
in
you, councillor. That's your 5
with
minutes.
the wishes of an association.
Thank you, councillor. Speaker for the motion. Speaker against the motion. Speakers for or against the motion. No further speakers. Councillor Congleton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. I didn't have the opportunity to do the statistics like Councillor Prodovnik did of the 49 objectors, but what I did read in the report was that there was an issue with heat impact from extensive metal surfaces. One would suggest that the heat impact from extensive metal surfaces could be directed to the next door neighbour. The lack of articulated facade to Mears Street, the potential damage to existing trees will contribute to localised flooding. I'm not sure how that could possibly happen unless all of the rainwater collection off the entire building was pumped somewhere that it couldn't absorb that level of flooding. I doubt that would be the case. The proposed scale and height is excessive and likely to adversely impact the adjoining property. And there were some interesting comments in relation to that because the next door neighbour, and I do remember quite well in the deputations that were put forward that Patrick Irwin actually said that House 170 is the proposed house of 170 is a big house on a small block, and yet 172 is 422 square metres. So we have a big house on a very similar sized block. But however, I'll just move on to the other parts I find interesting is that the WA Heritage Council, which as for my length of term on council, which is now nearly 16, 17 years with a break, is that a lot of respect was provided and acknowledged by the WA Heritage Council. And in this particular case, they say the scale of the building is appropriate, with it being smaller than many of the large residences in that area of Guildford. Now, I must admit, I haven't gone up and down the streets measuring the homes. I don't think that's my job to do that. Then changes were made to the front of the house, and the proposed revision received on the 3rd of April demonstrates that the design has taken cues from the street and its material and colour palette. Comments were further made that Phil Griffiths, who is the author of the Guildford Heritage Policy, part of the submission is that his report found that there would be no impact on the Guildford heritage values, and he concludes it would fit the Guildford structure. So, Mr Mayor, I'm going to support the officer's recommendation and reject this proposal.
Reject Councillor Johnston's motion, you're saying? Okay, thank you. Okay. Any further speakers for or against? Councillor McNamara speaking.
I'm speaking against. Mr Mayor, I just wanted to refer back to some of the statements that was made tonight with regard to two-storey and three-storey situations. Page 124, as was referred to by Councillor Johnston. It shows the two homes, one proposed home and one existing home, from the reverse side. It clearly shows, and this is one that was used as an example by Councillor Johnston in his submission, with regard to the stories, there are 1, 2 and a third story added, which is the roof converted to an attic, rooms or whatever in next door. Now, I really don't care what they've done, and it's none of my business whether or not they have 7 rooms or 2 rooms or whatever amount of rooms. But information that's coming before this council, Mr Mayor, must be correct. It must be debatable, proper and true. So, Councillor Johnston, I'm afraid what you were saying tonight with regard to the situation with regard to the 2 stories, if you said it, is incorrect. And this next door neighbour, the nearest home to this proposed development, is in fact 3 stories of a development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further speakers for or against the motion? Being none, Councillor Johnston, if you close debate, thank you.
Yeah,
you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, have councillors visited the site? I certainly have been to the site. I know other councillors have. I'm very familiar with it. Is it of its time? Okay, maybe it might potentially get built soon, but in terms of its design, it's not of any time. It does not fit into the early 21st century era. It's never going to be obvious where it fitted in our architecture. Unique features, which are not seen in other buildings, are a problem in a heritage area because it is not possible to place the building into its context and era in terms of the timeline of Guildford, which is going to go on into the future. In terms of objectors, I think Guildford people understand the Guildford Conservation Policy, its intent, and if you've got that many objectors, I think it needs to be taken notice, and the objections are good in terms of having valid planning grounds. So I think we need to listen to that. The opinion to be guided by is the Guildford Conservation Policy, which asks, does it fit? Is it appropriate? And in my opinion, Mr Mayor, it's not. It does not fit, unfortunately. There's no reason why we cannot have a modern house on this site, but not this particular design. Sea container structures, they're not sea containers, but they look like sea containers. Sea containers will not be allowed in any residential area, and they have a similar appearance. The Heritage Council has stated in a recent letter that it is council. We are the decision-making authority, the DMA as they call it. So we make the decision here. So councillors, I urge you to consider the arguments that have been put forward and the opinion of the people of Guildford, and please vote against this development, which I'm very sad to say does not fit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Councillor Scanlon is for the motion.
7. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The motion is lost.
Mayor, I'll be moving the officer's recommendation.
Okay, I have a move of the officer's recommendation. I have a seconder.
I just want to move some amendments.
to that?
Well, we've got to move the officer's recommendation firstly, so I need a seconder.
Yep.
Seconded, Councillor McCulloch. Do you wish to move an amendment?
Can I move a couple of amendments?
Well, there'll all be one, but yeah, come on.
Okay. First one, I'd like to move an amendment that we change the dark colour of the box structure on the western side of the building to a lighter shade that complies with the Guildford Conservation Precinct design guidelines.
Is that it?
I'd also like to ensure that no air conditioning units are put on the western side of the building.
Is that the two, is it? The mover and the seconder. I would just point out, councillors, I did see an email this afternoon from Mr Quaife, and I apologise not bringing it because I saw it on the way out. It said they wish to just deal with the motion and the application as set. So I think he indicated he wasn't prepared to take any amendments. So, mover and the seconder.
Can we ask him?
Well, it's not about the applicant, Mayor. We're the decision-making body.
I'm just making you aware of that, councillor. So
I appreciate that, and they're quite willing not to proceed with the building, but that amendment would satisfy me if the totality of the external building was consistent with the Guildford Conservation Policy. If you're happy to change it to that.
Mr Mayor, I just wanted to ask if we could ask the owner, if he's here tonight, if that's acceptable to him as well.
Well, I think Councillor Coley pointed out that he's the... So just one of those two amendments, there's a colour and air conditioning. Is the mover happy with that?
To the happy to hear from the mover of the amendment is that the whole external colours be consistent with the Guildford Conservation Policy.
The question is that amendment accepted to you at this point in time and moves the seconder to become part of the standing motion? If it's not, then Councillor Podolnik have to move as an amendment and get a second and we'll go to debate.
Are you happy with?
Well,
are you changing it to mine? I just want to be clear.
No, she's moving an amendment to your motion.
I'm happy with that, and thank you.
So you're happy to move it as an amendment to your motion? Yes. As a seconder?
No, Mr Mayor, because the colours are already in line with the Guildford Conservation Policy.
Okay, if we can't get agreement on that, Councillor Podolnik, you're going to have to debate it.
Can I ask the owner if he's prepared? Because I have actually spoken to the owner, and at the time I spoke to him, he seemed to be quite open to it. So I'm just wondering if he's changed his mind.
Well, okay, so I think that's your answer, no. So if you need it, you need to move it as an amendment. I need to get a seconder, and you need to debate it. Okay, Councillor Johnson's prepared to second it. Is there anyone against the amendment? There is. Take it away, Councillor Podolnik.
Okay, look, these are two very small amendments. Really, it's a gesture of goodwill to the community. There's been a lot of angst in relation to this development. There's been a lot of stress and a lot of deputations, a lot of submissions. It's not a big ask to just change a colour. We're asking them to change it to a lighter shade. We're not directing what colour they have to pick. And the air conditioning units, again, that's just a small ask that I think will go a big way in good neighbourly relations.
Councillor Johnson is the seconder.
Mr Mayor, yeah, this is fairly straightforward. Look, as we've got to this point, and this wall is never going to be seen by the owner, what we have here is a request for a colour change from the owner that lives next door at 172. They felt that this dark colour was, which is not actually in line with the Guildford Conservation Guidelines, was not something they really wanted to be looking at. They felt actually that colour blonde slate grey, when I spoke to Pamela, was a colour they'd be prepared to accept, and that is the reason for the proposed change. I don't believe it's going to affect the owner. I think it would build goodwill in the community if this is accepted, and it does rather surprise me that anybody would oppose this very reasonable request to make a slight change to the colour scheme. We're not changing the colours to something completely different, we're just making it a bit lighter, so it's not quite as dark and oppressive, so there'll be some light into their windows. And as for the requirement to have no air conditioners on that western wall, that seems entirely reasonable. There are 3 other walls and a roof on which they could place air conditioning units, and it seems an entirely reasonable and normal additional condition. So, councillors, I would urge you to support this very small change to this building. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Speaker against the motion? Councillor McCulloch.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, Mr Mayor, there may be a couple of minor amendments, but the officer's recommendation already has quite a specific of list of requirements. As I repeated, the colours are still in line with the Guildford policy. Basalt, from my years as an interior designer and in the building industry, is quite a light colour, as are some of the others. And computer-generated images, I know, are very unreliable. So looking at something on a piece of paper is very, very different, and you can get up to a 60% sort of darkening of colour by looking at something like that on paper. As to air conditioners, they haven't been determined, and I would think some air conditioners will sit on the roof, and I'm sure that these applicants will be sensitive, as they have already adapted this house to accommodate a lot of changes to fit in with design guidelines. So let's keep the main thing. Let's support our community and these ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCulloch. Speaker for the amendments? Any speakers against the amendment? Be no other speakers. Councillor Podolny, you close your debate. Thank you.
Look, I don't really have a lot to say. I must say I am surprised that the owners have decided to not make any minor amendments. I did speak to them. I've spoken to neighbours. I don't think this is a big ask. I think it'll actually help them to have good relationships with their neighbours. You're moving into a new town. It's a beautiful town. There's lovely people in Guildford. Start off on the right foot and you'll absolutely love living there. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Those in favour of the amendments? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Councillor Scanlon is also yes.
Okay. That's 8. Those against is 7. And the amendment is carried. Now becomes start of the substantive motion. So a mover and a seconder. Is anyone against the substantive motion as amended? There is. Do you wish to debate it?
No, thank you.
Okay. In that case, councillors, those in favour of the motion as amended? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
And Councillor Scanlon is in favour of the motion
As amended. Okay. That's 9. The motion is carried. Okay, that takes us now down to 5.4, which is the adoption of the annual budget. Councillor Johnson, I'll throw to you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, this one proves a challenge to read out. I think I'd be here for half an hour if I tried to read it out. What would you suggest I do?
I could make a suggestion, I probably might like it, but...
I couldn't read that out.
Yeah, it is, councillor. It's a lot of information getting one hit.
Tell you what, Mr Mayor, well...
Do you want to suspend standing orders for 5 minutes so councillors get a chance to read it? Because given that it came in sometime after 2 o'clock this afternoon.
Yeah, that makes sense, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Everyone happy to that? Okay. 5 minutes, councillors, if you can read the motion, then we'll go back to the debate.
They're the ones he doesn't own.
Councillors, that's the 5 minutes. Can I have a motion to resume standing orders? Move Councillor Parry to a seconder. Councillor Zanino. Thank you, councillors. We're back to standing orders. I assume you've all read it. Councillor Johnson, they've all read it, so I suggest you can probably go straight to your reasons now on page 26.
Mr Mayor, I propose to read out the reasons on page 26. So, councillors, assuming you've all read that and got to grips with it, I'd like to record the reasons for changing the officer's recommendation is that the ratepayers are expecting their rates to go down in line with the reduction in their property values. Ratepayers are also expecting rates relief as a result of the COVID-19 health and economic emergency. 3, keeping the city budget at the same level as last year will not stop most ratepayers' rates from increasing because GRV has changed unevenly as a result of the state government's revaluation. 4, If Councillor reduces the city budget by $11,035,960 to keep the rates in the dollar the lowest of either last year's rate in the dollar or the city recommendation for this year, any rate rise will be a result of the state government revaluation. 5. Council can reduce the budget by $11,035,960 for 1 year by cutting the capital spend from the municipal fund as follows. A. Operations Centre, $110,000. B. West Swan Home Support, $70,000. C. Midland Town Hall, $288,900. D. Acquisition Programme, $150,000.
Councillor Johnston, just want to cut that down. We're running out of time as listed.
Okay, as listed, Mr Mayor. I assume you've all read that.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Councillor Catalano. Is there anyone against?
Oh, there's people against.
There is. I assume you wish to debate it.
Yes.
Councillor Johnson, you have 5 minutes.
Councillors, I urge you to consider carefully this motion. This, I believe, is the first alternate budget motion, certainly in my 4.5 years, and probably has been the first that's been developed in many years. So a comprehensive process of seeking input from councillors. You all received an email from me, and including a comprehensive consultation with the staff that has been going on since April to determine this list. So this list did not come out of nowhere. This motion, councillors, responds to community expectations received from ratepayers at community meetings, emails from ratepayers commentary on Facebook, and on page 55 of the supplementary agenda is a summary of the 6 submissions received by the city in response to the advertising of differential rates. All 6 submissions recommended no increase in the rate in the dollar. Why is no increase in the rate in the dollar needed? Councillors, this year is an extraordinarily tough year for many of the people whose interests we represent, the electeds, residents and ratepayers, as defined in the Local Government Act. The emergency in WA has evolved as primarily a financial emergency impacting the people whose interests we represent. So this year will have seen for many a reduction in their income or loss of their job, and at the same time a reduction in their property value, which is leading to an expectation that rates will at least not rise and ideally will go down in line with the reduction in property values and gross rental value, or GRV. And I just want to ask a couple of questions at this point, Mr Mayor, just to make it clear the effect of my motion. So I'd like to know if the GRV, that's through you, Mr Mayor, to Ms Lay, if the GRV rate in the dollar is as per the city recommendation, how many properties will have a rate rise this year?
Ms Lay.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the GRV properties that would have a rate rise would be 22,790.
And if the GRV rate in the dollar stays the same, as I propose in my motion, how many properties will have a rate increase?
The GRV properties, it would be 1,055.
Thank you, Ms Lay.
So, councillors, that's the difference. It's either 22,000 residential GRV properties are getting a rate rise or 1,000 residential properties are getting a rate rise. That is the difference. The community have seen that the federal government and state governments have provided financial assistance during the community. Many in the community that we represent expect that council will respond likewise to the emergency by providing...
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Yes, what's your point of order?
Point of order is that we have provided, or we're going to provide, financial assistance through the COVID-19 hardship policy, also an economic stimulus package that has been determined in the 15th of April. So I ask him to withdraw the comment, please.
Well, that is a good point, whether it's a point of order or not, but it is a good point to make. Carry on, Councillor.
Yeah, it's not a point of order. I'll say, by providing further financial support, by not increasing the rate in the dollar this year, to allow the state government's mostly downward revaluation of gross rental values to have the effect of reducing rates for those whose property values have gone down, which, as we've heard, is most of them. On the 8th of May, state government recommended that councils keep their rate in the dollar unchanged, which is exactly what I'm proposing here. And just before
point of order, Mr Mayor.
What's your point of order?
That's incorrect as well. Mr McGowan said in form of press releases to freeze their rates. There was nothing about the unit in rate in the dollar. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is a point of order, Councillor.
I'd say, unfortunately, Councillor Parry's wrong. And I've also got this, just came out tonight, joint media statement by 4 state-elected members who represent the city of Swan area, saying that, in essence, they're saying that council seem to be happy to take the increase in GRV when it goes up, but are not happy when it goes down. Anyway, we can achieve a budget with an unchanged rate in the dollar by reducing capital expenditure by $11 million. As we've learned, there is $42 million in the budget to be carried forward to the 2021 financial year. So if we're already pushing that much forward, this reduction is quite achievable because we weren't able to achieve this year's capital expenditure. The list of capital cuts has been identified after consultation with the whole of Council back on the 3rd of May and several further refinements in consultation with Ms Lay, Councillor Catalano and other interested councillors. The final list of capital spending reductions was prepared by the staff, from which they have prepared a complete alternative budget and business plan. It is a professionally prepared budget that meets ratepayers' expectations.
Thank you, 5 minutes.
3 more lines, Mr Mayor. By maintaining the GRV rate in the dollar unchanged from last year, that allows the ratepayer to benefit from any reduction in the value of their property's GRV by reducing their rates. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconder, Councillor Catalano.
Yes, thank you. As we know, 2 things happened this year. We had the COVID pandemic, which has basically resulted in many families losing their jobs or basically had very, very short working hours, and they've still got bills to pay, mortgages that have to be met. And we've also had a fall in the GRV, which is the gross rental value on most properties. And the reality is, to most people, well, if my property, this is the way most people out there interpret it, well, if my property prices have fallen, why am I paying more rates? And that's a good question, actually, because it was one that also made me think, why? Why would that be?
Mr Mayor, sorry.
Yes, Councillor, what's your point of order?
The statement that if your property values have fallen as against GRV, a statement of your property values have fallen in respect to your rates.
I think the point you're making is that the value of property has no impact on your rates.
No, it's nothing to do with your rates.
It's the gross rental value as a rent. So,
I was actually pointing out what ratepayers say to me. That's what they ask me. That's what I was pointing out there. And I thought, yes, good point. We're talking about gross rental values in this chamber, and I get your point, but actually the way the ratepayer sees it, they see it, my property prices have fallen, so why am I paying more rates? Because they know, as well as most people know, that there's a value in proportion to their gross rental value that determines the amount they'll pay in rates. So we've had, going back to the COVID emergency and the pandemic and all the economic fallout from it, we've had quite a lot of statements from the Mayor and from the city itself about how families were going to be given assistance in terms of, at first the assumption out there was that there was going to be a 0% rate rise. A lot of people out there assumed that, from the rhetoric that was coming out from the state government and from our own council, they assumed that they considered that to be a 0% rate increase. Then we were told, oh, no, that's not the case. It's a 0% rate yield. Okay, that's a technical thing. And that is basically because, yes, we aren't going to be able to get the same amount of money in if people are rated at the same rate in the dollar as they were last year. because obviously their gross rental values have fallen. So there's two ways to fix that. You either put up the rate in the dollar and thereby bring in the extra yield, or you cut your spending. Well, a lot of people in the community have told me what they want, and they want their spending cut. And that's something that this council is consistently going on. I have heard many councillors in this chamber talking about cutting spending.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, you have 1 minute. Yeah, what's your point of order, Councillor?
Point of order is that in the stimulus package introduced on the 15th of April, we actually have funded $9 million worth of spending, economic stimulus package. That's all.
Yeah, that's a point. Okay, carry on, Councillor.
Well, thank you for that. But the point is that Councillor Johnson and myself have worked extremely hard with staff, and we've actually found those cuts. We've found those cuts, and that means that we can now, if this motion is adopted, we can actually adopt a budget that means that there will be no increase in the dollar rate in the dollar, which means that 22, well, let's say 21 or 22,000 people won't be paying extra rates, because we've just heard from Ms Slay that if this is adopted tonight, only 1,000 people will be getting an increase. I'm talking residential properties now. Residential ratepayers will be paying an extra rates. Otherwise...
Thank you, Councillor. That's your 5 minutes. Thank you. Speaker against the motion? Question, Councillor McNamara.
It's to Councillor Johnson, through you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Johnson, did you ask Ms Lay, with regard to, you asked her the various questions about how many would be getting pay rises if this, and you asked how many would be getting pay rises if not? Rate rises.
Yes, 25.
So, did you ask the question how many would be getting rate rises next year if you introduce or reintroduce these items that you want to take out this year? How many people would be affected by that particular rate rise?
Yeah, looks a good point. Councillor, happy to answer that question. Yes, I have asked that question during the consultation process when we developed this budget. What would happen next year? Well, the simple answer, Councillor, is we go through the exact same budget exercise that we've gone through this year. We determine what goes on the budget, and we sort of vote accordingly. So, councillors, we're currently pushing forward $42 million worth of capital expenditure that the city does not have the capacity to do. So that's indicating that we do have the capacity to reduce
Councillor,
that.
You're actually debating again, so your answer was yes, you did. So thank you. Against the question. Further question?
And that is, well, the first statement, that's the most bureaucratic answer that I've had from a non-bureaucrat in all my life. So, basically, what you're telling me is that you don't know what pay rises or what rate rises are going to be next year because you didn't get an answer.
I don't think anyone can do that.
Okay, that's a question. I can answer that.
Well,
again, I can't see into the future. None of us can. Next year's rate rise will be determined by this council next year.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, Speaker against the motion. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, this motion has only been presented to us late this afternoon. How can we seriously consider the significant budgetary changes that have appeared in this proposal before us tonight? We've been considering this budget since February. I can't in all honesty support it due to the last-minute nature of such an important part of the city's annual financial process and its importance as to how it affects our long-term financial position. There have been no discussions in regards to any of these amendments by Councillor Johnson to us, and we have been looking at the 2021 budget since February. Why weren't we included in discussions as to the proposals in this alternate motion as early as the 24th of May? This last-minute motion to Council, I believe, is a lack of consideration and respect from Councillor Johnson towards councillors and City of Swan ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Speaker for the motion. Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor. we're talking about lack of consideration and respect, and I'll just take that point up with Councillor Jones, is that the fact is lack of consideration and respect for whom? We've got thousands and thousands of ratepayers out there. We need to have consideration for them. Now, regardless of whether this was considered a late item, I disagree completely. The lack of consideration for the ratepayer, that's what we need. We need to have consideration for the ratepayers out there, not just for one another. We can get by. We're getting some salary from the city or some payment from the City of Swan for sitting here tonight. I want to have respect for the ratepayer. I want to have respect for the 20,000 or so that will not be getting a increase in their rates if this motion goes through. We are going ahead with this stimulus package, as to Councillor Parry's comment. We will be going ahead with the stimulus package anyway, so we are getting the stimulus, and the proposal by Councillor Johnson is to go ahead with the budget, go ahead with the stimulus package and spend all that money and get our local economy going. This discussion has been around for a long time. Months ago, early in the year, we were talking about, this came before Council, it was rejected. This is simply in another format. I make the distinction in what Councillor Johnson put forward before, and that was he did propose to cut the salaries of, or the payments to staff. Now, this didn't go down too well, and I disagreed with it completely and made that clear to Councillor Johnson. And you'll note that this proposal is not to affect the staff salaries or payments. And just going back to the Great Depression, I was watching America in Colour the other day, and they were talking about one of the things that contributed towards the Great Depression was actually cutting council workers' salaries in the United States. So that wasn't, it was a clear indication that that was probably not a good route to go through. Councillor Catalan talked about community expectation, and the expectation is out there that we should be cutting our rates. We should be cutting down on what we're charging the community for the services that we provide. Simply by putting the rate in the dollar up, it's a sort of sleight of hand in some respects that we are actually taking a reduction in the gross rental valuations
Point of order,
What's
Mr. Mayor.
your point of order,
The sleight of hand comment is completely inappropriate. We're not exactly hiding in the shadows in this council chamber. I completely reject that comment, Mr. Mayor.
I'll remove that comment,
Okay,
take that comment back. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. But they are expecting a reduction in their rates because, in effect, their property values have gone down. Their ability to rent their property has gone down. This decrease in rates that effectively most properties will get is going to be better in the hand of the ratepayer than it will be in our pockets, councillors. They need to have this money in their hands and they will spend it in the community, that it's going to be a better stimulus for the local economy if we give it back to the ratepayer. The expectation upon us tonight is that we are going to give them a rates decrease. I just want to go to a WOLGA circular that we all get, and we've all got it. This was from the Treasurer, Ben Wyatt. It talks about the total representative household basket of fees and charges will decrease in Western Australia in 2021. And he says it is only fair, this is a quote from the Treasurer, it's only fair that lower GRVs set by the Valuer General are passed on to Western Australians. That's coming from our Treasurer, councillors. It's only fair that the lower GRVs set by the Valuer General are passed on to Western Australians. I want to take up that opportunity. We can't ensure that our community, our ratepayers, are going to have a lower household basket of fees and charges if we don't pass on this.
1 minute, Councillor.
Approve this motion as it stands tonight. This is our last opportunity to do this. This is our very last opportunity. We have been trying. There's a certain group of councillors in this chamber who have been trying to get this across the line for the sake of our ratepayers. We need to make this happen. I think that's probably all I need to say. Let's get on with this. Let's take the leap. We are not going to affect significant infrastructure changes or developments in the City of Swan by accepting this. Councillor Johnson has considered it very carefully with the assistance of Councillor Catalano and staff and other councillors. Please support this. We need to get this across the line for the sake of our ratepayers.
Speaker against the motion, Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. The
There are a couple of things I want to address. First things first, it was just mentioned that the Treasurer seems to think that we should be doing something for the community. Well, we've had a letter that was raised in discussion from local members of Parliament saying what we should be doing. And what did they do to us, the Treasurer, to hold off for a year on GRV revaluations? Nothing. They achieved nothing. So the point of the matter is revaluations have occurred, which means it's impossible for this council to come up with a set of numbers which would be the same as what you paid last year. It's impossible. So that's the first issue that I have. A bit of double standard there. One minute they're saying you've got to do well, and on the other hand they're not going to do anything about it. Well, that's just disgraceful. We are not actually increasing the amount of money that we want to collect. We're collecting the same amount of money. Now, the fact of the matter is, because GRV valuations were not extended for a year for the revaluations to occur, means that we have got to readjust things. Now, in respect of that, I just want to make a point. I looked at Councillor Johnson's motion. His change in valuation is a 12% reduction for residential. But here's the one that intrigued me. Midland Drainage down 8.4. This is for business. Hazelmere Drainage down 8.3. Hazelmere Industrial Area Infrastructure down 12.5%. Business. Now, and the other one was 6%. So I really was quite intrigued about the 12.5. Just to cover a few other points. One of the areas that I think that we've got to do is to ensure that we keep business going in the City of Swan. Now, the things that have been proposed to be taken out of our budget are things that will tick over business, employment in the City of Swan. And I think that's something that we have a responsibility to do. But more importantly, I want to make a point that many people have said to me that they want to have their recreation centres, they want to have their libraries. Now, you know, the libraries cost us a packet of money. They want to have all of those things that the community expect us to deliver. So in that regard, you simply can't go cutting too hard, because otherwise you're going to start to lose expenditure being put into the community, into getting things done. One classic one there is Hadwell Road. I mean, that road's ready to fall apart. We've got to get on and do that work. What else did I want to say?
You can't milk your time by staying silent, Councillor.
Well, I've got 5 minutes. I'll just tick the clock over. My fault.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. Silence is not relevant.
Thank you. So I want to finish by saying, councillors, for the last 4 budgets, I have pushed and pushed and pushed council to keep our rates as low as possible. In fact, I think I've pushed for a no rate rise for 4 years in a row, and I think I voted against each budget in each of those years. And the fact of the matter is, this year is an effective no increase. Effective no increase. And so in that regard, I will vote for it, because effective no increase, albeit that there will be changes, those are not at our fault. They're at the fault of others, and we can put fault and blame wherever you like. The fact of the matter is that we have got to provide for the community. I don't believe we should do so at a massive increase, and in fact we have done it at the same revenue as last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Speaker for the motion? Speaker again?
Oh, sorry, for. Sorry.
Okay, Councillor Budovnik.
Okay, Council has the opportunity tonight to support a motion that cuts over $11 million from our spending to better help ratepayers. This motion cuts city spending, but it still enables economic stimulus by supporting a lot of the city's capital works projects. In April, our Mayor wrote to the local government minister requesting a deferral of the requirement to adopt valuations, even though adopting those valuations is a requirement under the Local Government Act. In his response, the local government minister put the responsibility of our budget firmly back in our hands. He said, I quote, "Ensuring that businesses and households receive a rates notice no greater than 2019-20 is a critical local leadership action that local governments can take." He continued to say, against the trend of property value increases over an extended period, local governments have been aware that a reduction in GRVs has been coming for at least 3 years. Council, we can cut our spending and adjust our budgets accordingly. I ask Council to please support this motion that has remodelled the budget, made real cuts and is doable. Staff have run their ruler over it. It does measure up. Let's do it.
Thank you, Councillor. Speaker against the motion? Councillor Parry.
Sorry about that. Councillors, as a professional in the financial and commercial sector, I first want to acknowledge the fantastic work and thorough work of the City of Swan staff in the preparing this budget. I know how difficult it can be to appease the Council and the demands and the strain that puts on our staff resource. We thank you very much. As a new council, I've been impressed with the budget process, the ample opportunities we've had to ask questions, interrogate spending and find efficiencies. Personally, I think this is one of the best processes I've been involved in. To change the budget now is to change a horse midstream. Not only will it affect our overall budget, our rates process, which is hard up against deadlines and every single page of a 10-year business plan. It's bad business to make changes on the run, and it is honestly a sign of inability of councillors to understand the complexity of the process. Councillors, tonight we need to make a decision to invest in our community, a decision to continue providing services.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Yep. What's your point of order?
Point of order is that Councillor Parry is suggesting that we don't understand the process, whereby putting forward an alternate budget, we clearly do understand the process.
I'd make a comment in regards to that.
Well, I think, yeah, okay, I think it's slightly inappropriate, but query, but what's your comment?
I'll continue on.
I'd like to make a point of order, if you don't mind.
Well, you're gone.
Because actually I do understand the complexity of it.
Okay, we're good to hear that. Thank you. Carry on, Councillor.
Okay. Councillors, one point I really need to get across tonight is to look beyond the politics and to serve for the future. The City of Swan is the fastest growing council in the Perth metro area. Brabham, Dayton and Henley Brook residents need community assets. Ellenbrook needs a swimming pool and Balladrew wants an intergenerational park. There's a Greek proverb that says, society grows when a wise man plants a tree under whose shade they know they will never sit. We need to be realistic about our future. If we continue to deliver services to the community, we need to keep funding those services from rates. It's clear the only way we can reduce our spending is to cut or defer our services or capital items, and the community has vocally exclaimed that is undesirable, such as our stimulus package I'll explain later. We also need to recognise that the local government, as a stimulator for the COVID-19 recovery, it is in the best interest of our community that we bring forward spending of infrastructure to create jobs, which in turn encourages spending within our economy, and the community gets a great new asset as well. What the alternative motion is proposing is a measure of austerity and not one for growth. Councillors, in my professional opinion, this is a budget that provides us the agility and flexibility necessary to navigate these unprecedented times. We have voted to freeze rate revenue. Councillor Congdon's in my motion provided a stimulus package that have a major benefit to families, in particular the acceleration of playground renewals, which I also wish to note Councillor Johnson raised in his newsletter as well.
Order, Mr Mayor. No playgrounds, swimming pools, rec centres, services are cut in this motion.
That's right. Carry on.
I'm just saying. We have protected our local clubs and community organisations. We are protecting the people who have suffered the most by the COVID-19, by the financial hardship policy that 14 of us approved. We also allow free parking to assist small businesses that need it the most. We have waived community leases and outgoings for 6 months. Councillors, in times of uncertainty, it is the government's responsibility, whether local, state or federal, is to protect our community. Fortunately, you said this on the 15th of April.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. My motion does not in any way not protect the community. So we're getting a bit off track here.
Well, I think it might be Councillor Parry's opinion, but carry on, Councillor.
That's my opinion. I'll stand by it. Say it one more time. I've said before, the City of Swan staff are highly professional and highly skilled in financial judgment. Trust their judgment. Having run ruler over this document in fine detail, I can commend this budget and ask you to support our community by supporting the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parry. Speaker in favour of the motion. Speaker against the motion. Councillor Congerton.
Well, I think, councillors, we all knew this was going to be a highly debated item tonight, and I'm so pleased it's getting a good airing. I guess what is probably a little bit of a concern for me that the rates in the dollar that were advertised and the report tabled was 62,000 rateable properties in the City of Swan, and we only received 6 submissions. So that kind of moves against all of these 22,790 impacted residents that didn't send in a submission.
Point of order there, Mr Mayor. Those 22,000 people don't know yet they're going to get a pay rates rise.
Well, no one does at this point in time, and no one can actually predict it. Which point of order?
Please ask that if it's not a point of order, wait for those questions until the reply.
Yeah, in reply, but you run out of things to say. Thank you, Councillor.
Lots of time to reply later.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor McMahon. Carry on, Councillor Congerton.
Thank you. To receive this new recommendation, alternative recommendation, in the late hour, even though it's been in discussion since February, the depth of it I find amazing. And I'd just like to go through a few things. And before I do that, I might just hold my hand up and say at a meeting only of a week ago, I asked about a parachute. Well, this is like a bombing, not a parachute. So we run through some of the items that you want to remove, Councillor. The Operations Centre, 110,000. The money for the design improvements of the old workshops needs to be fixed because the roof is leaking. Parts of it you can't operate in and it's a safety hazard. I don't know whether you received that information when you were asking the staff about what could be cut. Midland Town Hall, the 288,000 for painting the Town Hall. We went through and voted unanimously on fast-tracking projects, so this is one we're not going to fast-track this, we're not going to have this budget, we're going to remove it and maybe bring it back at some other time, and I suggest down the bottom is to bring them back next year. Guildford Parking, this is interesting, $50,000, Guildford Parking, heavens above, how many times I've heard about Guildford Parking. We've got to sort out the Guildford Parking. The Guildford Parking is not sorted out. We've got to put up no standings. We've got to take away no standings. Don't go on this side of the road, that side of the road. Guildford Parking. Then what you do is say, well, no, we don't need to spend any money on Guildford Parking, $50,000, take it away. And we'll deal with it maybe when people stop whinging about it. But they're whinging about it now. And rightly so. Allenbrook North open space. Well, there you are. There's a couple of bucks there that... improve lighting because the user groups can't operate without appropriate lighting. And really the list goes on. The administration building furniture equipment, 144,000. Let's put that off, even though they might be in disrepair. Let's not give them new stuff. Let's just take that out. Swan Active is another one. But there are some large items there, Councillor. And then we go on to let's give it away. This is a bit I love. Let's give it away. In the event your motion was successful, are you aware how much money would be given away to the commercial players in the City of Swan? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 commercial players I have got the figures on I didn't want to do them all, but those 6 were significant. $447,000 in rates would be lost. Councillor, please. $447,000 would be lost. That is an effect on a commercial operator's bottom line. And if you suggest it, they might all run around and give their staff pay increases and or help pay their rates. I'm not quite sure that would be the case. But did you consider the 447,000? Maybe not. I provided you this little list. I dropped it off around your tables when we were in that little hold it off section while you were reading your extensive report.
Councillor.
Thank you. And if you have a look down that list, you'll see this is what the current GRV tells you. Minus, 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 minus. There's a few plus, 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 plus. And when you have a look at the plus, $5 plus, plus $25, plus $5, plus $5, plus $20. The impact it's going to have on a lot of families, I don't think you are given enough work or credence. And I'm just talking about what's going to happen next year when the wave happens, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
$43 million wave coming at you next year.
Thank you, Councillor Conklin. The Speaker in favour of the motion. Further speakers against the motion? Councillors, I will ask to keep it short because we are running out of time. Councillor McCulloch.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, I find it hard to understand that as responsible elected members, we should be considering a budget that was only presented to us today and not shared earlier with the decision makers in this room. I believe to consider this would be gross mismanagement and poor governance. In April, Council voted on a budgetary path wholeheartedly, and that's the budget presented to us with the officer's recommendation. Councillors, let's map out the budget path for elected members for 2021. February, we had a budget workshop. March, we had a budget briefing, cancelled due to COVID, but associated documents all sent that we saw and read and devoured. April, a budget briefing. May, advertisement of rates. And June, the final budget briefing. Up until this week, we've had councillors asking what a line item is and not even sure of what the LTFP is. That is seriously concerning. Councillors, if we change the budget now, we change the rate in the dollar, it affects our LTFP, significantly alters staff's annual budget planning processes, results in a reduction of services to our community, to our ratepayers. And if we're looking at the consideration
point
for
of order,
ratepayers...
Mr Mayor, that's incorrect.
So explain that, Councillor. Just talk to the CEO about some procedure matters.
Point here is this proposed alternate budget does not reduce any services. So any mention of reduction in services is an incorrect fact. So it's factually wrong.
Carry on, Councillor.
And I believe I'm correct, Councillor Johnson. So, and the expectation of the ratepayer is that we are supporting our community with so many different things and stimuluses to what is being done. We're at this time, councillors, trying to stimulate our economy and trying to support small business. Councillors, this budget that we've only just seen in the last few hours will impact on people's lives. It's also disrespectful to hard-working staff who've been working around the clock trying to get the right outcome for our communities, considering the ratepayers and their expectations.
Mr Mayor, point of order. Suggesting that it's factually incorrect to suggest that creating an alternative budget is disrespectful of staff. Staff are there to assist councillors to make correct decisions, and providing an alternative budget is something that staff have been happy to support me doing.
Strike them out. Carry on, please.
Again, Councillor Johnson, my opinion. Mr Mayor, I believe that what we're seeing here is intentional disruption. We need to look at...
Mr Mayor, point of order, Mr Mayor. This is not disruption. This is doing our job as councillors. So staff have been happy to support this process.
Okay, all right. Councillor, I'll just ask you to keep to shortening your time frame and just keep your bullet points, please.
So, in addition to that, we're looking at some of those things, and Councillor Congleton has already addressed some of the things that would go by the wayside. Councillors, the 2021 financial year budget will present even more challenges than this year's. By deferring the $12 million to 2021-22, it'll only make it harder. The method of reducing the budget, or this method of reducing the budget, is not consistent with Council's adopted rating methodology. Council approved a 0% rate rise as part of the COVID measures, and we followed our rating methodology.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. This is following the accepted rating methodology.
I don't agree with you, Councillor. Carry on, Councillor McCulloch.
Reducing rate revenue by $12 million this year will mean that Council will face a huge rate increase next year in order to develop a balanced budget. We hear from COVID, we're all in this together.
Point of order. There's no guarantee that we're going to be facing an enormous, whatever it was, rate increase. That can be dealt with next year.
I'm not going to agree with your point of order because Councillor McCulloch is laying on the ground what could happen next year and the bow wave that we face. So carry on, Councillor.
In order to develop a balanced budget, councillors, it's robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's playing catch up, and this is going to be the trigger. The long-term financial impact of reducing rates by $12 million will be detrimental in future years.
To order, Mr Mayor, factually incorrect. It's $11 million.
Well, we won't quibble over a couple hundred. Can you wrap up, Councillor?
Ratepayers would quibble over $1 million.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I do have my full 5 minutes, and I object to the constant point of orders, which I do believe is a strategy to interrupt me as well. Councillors, the rates in the dollar have been advertised, and that report is tabled tonight and out. I will leave that. We've gone over it. It is disappointing that this has been left to the most final stages of the budget process to announce this type of alternative motion. Councillors are provided many opportunities from February to work together and to give the staff direction to build the budget. We gave the staff the direction and they have delivered the budget based on this direction. They've delivered this budget under extreme pressures due to COVID impacts and the financial measures we're taking as a council to support the local community. So, councillors, please think carefully as to what we do with this year's budget.
Thank you, Councillor McCulloch. Councillors, we are right on 7:30, so I'm going to take one more speaker and I'll ask Councillor Johnson to close the debate. At least get part of this out of the way before we have to adjourn. So, Councillor Lucas, you had your hand up earlier. Where possible, if keep it short, please, Councillor.
Thank you. I'm talking against the motion. Councillors, I start from the basis that the annual budget is part of our part and parcel of our long-term financial plan and therefore our long-term financial stability of this city. Councillor Henderson raised an important issue concerning businesses in Hazelmere, but I extend that to businesses in South Guildford and they're big businesses, and also in Midland. And I don't have to ask Ms Lay now some questions about loss of rate income because Councillor Congleton provided me with the figures and it was not far off $500,000 of lost rate if Councillor Johnson's motion is adopted. Additionally, by deferring all of these projects onto next year or future years, ultimately the ratepayers of the City of Swan will pay for those projects. The deferral of $11 million, and I'm surprised Councillor Johnson allowed Councillor McCulloch to say it 4 times before he corrected her. It only transfers to future budgets, Mr Mayor, and I can't support that. It's not in the best long-term financial viability of the City of Swan or our ratepayers, and therefore I'm conscious of the time. I won't say anything further, but I can't support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Johnson, I'll now ask you to close the debate.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, Mr Mayor, so many points have been made there that it's almost impossible to respond. I'll just begin by just asking one question of Ms Lay. Ms Lay, did I meet all the deadlines you gave me?
He did, Mr Mayor.
Yeah. Mr Mayor, I did my best with this process. So if you got it later than I would have liked and you would have liked, I did my best, and I think maybe we change the deadlines and next year do it even earlier. Look, councillors, it does affect the long-term financial plan of the city. It moves it rightwards. It just pushes everything out into the future. And the fact that we're moving $42 million of carry forwards forward anyway indicates that we don't have the capacity to actually deliver our capital budget. So therefore, this is not anything too hard or too difficult. Robbing Peter to pay Paul. Look, by putting 22,000 people's rates up when they're expecting them to go down, that is robbing Peter to pay the people who will be delivering these capital works projects. Councillors, we're not borrowing money. It's not a stimulus. The $11 million, well, I'm not setting fire to it. We're giving it back to the ratepayers. They can spend it. There's $11 million going into the economy. It's just going to different people. So, there was some talk earlier on about $444,000 in rates lost. Well, I don't think so. I don't see anything there. Guildford parking, look, we had to select these items by coming up with the original list that I sent you guys out on the 3rd of May. And, Councillor Parry responded. He'll remember that he got it because he had something to say about it. This list was developed in consultation with the staff, so there are no safety issues here because the original list that I proposed had anything that had any safety issue on it was removed by the staff. They recommended me not to go ahead with that, and I listened to them. Oh, yeah. All right, thank you very much. City of Swan staff have done a great job. They helped me prepare this. I would actually like to thank the staff for their help in this. And actually, I'd even thank the Mayor for letting me go ahead with this motion, because you might have noticed in the green sheet, his was first. Thank you, Mr Mayor, for letting me actually put this to Council.
You're not starting a bromance, are you, Ed?
Sorry, Mr Mayor?
You're not starting a bromance, are you?
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, Mr Mayor. No, you've been very kind to let us go ahead with this. And, it means that the staff's hard work has not gone to waste. Look, we're not cutting anybody's swimming pools. We're not cutting any services. This budget has been notified. Some of the things on this were notified in advance. You have had an indication. But when I sent it out back on the 3rd of May, I only got one response. That was from Councillor Parry, who I discovered was a union leader.
Thank you, Councillor. That's your 3 minutes.
Okay. Anyway, Councillor.
I'm not even going to bother responding. Thank you, Councillor. That's your 3 minutes.
Okay, so, Councillors, I urge you to vote for this motion, which is absolutely wonderful
Those
motion.
in favour of the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, the motion is lost. Now I need to move the staff recommendation. Moved Councillor Parry, seconded Councillor Congdon. Is there anyone against? Councillor, do you really wish to debate it at this late hour? Okay. In that case, all those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Councillor Scanlon is in favour.
11, 12. 12 in favour. The motion is carried. 3. Or 2 to 3. Okay, councillors, we've now gone past 7:30, so I'm going to adjourn the meeting to a date to be fixed, and we'll have a look at the calendar and send out some options tomorrow. So on that, thank you, councillors, thank you everybody watching, and thank you, staff.